Hello, everybody. I hope that you guys can hear us clearly. Welcome to the Collective Podcast. We hope that this podcast in time will serve you guys as you search God's Word for some knowledge that you can take into your own lives and ministries, as well as we just want to have some fun, make some fart noises into microphones, and joke around.
For sure.
Joke around a little bit. But I can see Davin Entinger, man. You're always the first one on the stream. So good to see you again. You're my best friend named Davin Entinger, who comments first on YouTube streams. Thank you guys so much for joining, though. If you're here for us and this is your first time, we are officially live on YouTube. So I can see your guys' comments right here. If you comment something funny, I might point it out. I might say, oh, that's not super funny. But we'll continue to engage with you guys in that comment section in the chat here. If you want to ask us a question that we can answer live right here, right now, we would love to see your guys' questions. If you want to have a comment, we can point that out and we can discuss that a little bit further. But we can also look back at the comment section of this YouTube video in the future, and we can, and you guys can comment things that you want us to talk about. I think next week we're going to have an awesome message with James and with one of the residents, the new interns here at Calvary. But we're going to move forward with that next week. But this week, don't want to skip past this. We have the one and only, I call him Matthias. But how do you
work?
His name's Matthias.
So funny thing that you actually kind of brought that up. So so many people, I've met so many people in my life where they don't know how to pronounce my name.
Really?
And so I'm like, okay, I got to figure out a way to have them pronounce my name, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you look at how it's sounded, it's like Matthias. And so I'm like, okay, I say my thighs is. Yeah, that's why I tell them, I was like, hey, anytime you think of me, just think of my thighs is.
My thighs is.
And they're like, oh my gosh, that makes sense. And it usually works.
There you go. Well, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Dude, Matthias, it's so good to have you. Matthias, do you want to give us a quick rundown of your life from birth until your foreseen death in the future? Or I'm just kidding. Just tell us, Matthias, just tell us who you are.
Yeah, so I grew up in Kearney, Nebraska. Which
west.
is west if you're 2.5 hours
somewhere
west. A small little town and stuff. And I grew up there. Played a lot of sports when I was younger. Basketball. I did gymnastics when I was actually super young, which was super fun. But then my body was like, you can't bend like that.
You can't do that anymore.
And I was like, okay, I'm done.
You're done.
I'm done. And so that was a lot of fun. And then I was probably 16, 17-ish when I moved to Omaha here, and then started, church, going to different churches, experiencing that. And now I'm here in Omaha at Calvary, which is
there
great. Still coaching. I coach high school tennis at a tennis high school. I mean, what do I say?
I'm the president of tennis.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I teach. I'm a pro at a local facility here in Omaha,
that's
and
sick.
then I also do high school tennis. And so sometimes I get them confused and
that's awesome.
And stuff.
No, dude, that's super cool. So. Matthias, it's awesome having you. And I can say first and foremost from experience, Matthias has one of the smoothest jump shots you'll ever see in your entire life. Just watch a video. It's crisp. The elbow is in, and it's hand in the cookie jar, and he grabs them all.
Yep,
it's so good, so smooth.
Gotta get all the cookies.
Gotta get all the cookies. Matthias, I love having you here, man. You've become an awesome friend, and we're super glad that you're on the team here at Calvary in the student ministry, and I know Bellevue South loves having you over there. So last week, if you were watching Collective on Wednesday nights, we have that at 6:30. It's just a YouTube show that we put on. It's hilarious.
It's good.
And I'm not biased at all.
Oh, 100%.
But Matthias delivered an awesome message on the biblical character Joshua. And so Matthias, in a couple minutes here, do you want to just run through what your message was on and how Joshua kind of ties into this story, this series that we're going on called Zero to Hero? So
yeah, so what we're doing, guys, is we're doing this series called Zero to Hero. I'm going to start there, and it's where we're finding people in the Bible, real people in the Bible, who literally started with either nothing, or they were just and not necessarily an outcast, but just nobody knew who they were.
Yeah.
And then they all of a sudden became this giant hero, and how God used them.
Yeah.
And so I got the one of Joshua, and I was super happy about this because Joshua is one of my favorite characters. If I had to sit down at a dinner and ask questions with somebody, Joshua would be in my top 5.
There you go.
Just for a few facts for you guys who do not watch the show, Joshua, there's a lot going on. Mm-hmm. It's 24 chapters, 658 verses. It's over a course of 40 years, and there's over 2 million people.
Yeah.
And so the message that I gave would kind of just focus on the first probably 1 to 3 chapters of Joshua. And I really just focused on the verse of being strong and courageous.
Yeah, be strong and courageous.
Yeah.
That's good.
And so, the brief synopsis of it is, Joshua was kind of like this nobody. He was a servant under God and then under Moses, and then Moses died.
Yep.
And so they're like, hey, well, who is supposed to lead us into the promised land?
Yeah.
And God's like, well, Joshua's going to do it.
And everybody had to be
And exactly. Ooh. And like, I was just like thinking of my perspective. I was like, man, if I was Joshua, I'd be like,
nah,
I can't lead 2 million people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's what kind of like I focus my message around, is like Joshua just like having the attentive ears and listening to God, and then also just being strong and courageous, because like, that's going to take a lot of strength and
definitely
a lot of courage.
That's super, super good. And the biggest thing about Joshua, people can ask like who Joshua was, and Matthias did an awesome job of highlighting the fact that so in this podcast and in this series, we talked about Moses a couple of weeks ago, and Brandon delivered an awesome message about his faithfulness and using the Michael Jordan reference of retiring at the very top and then coming back and doing it again and just winning everything. And so Moses was imperfect, but he did amazing things for God's kingdom.
For sure.
And then Joshua, whenever Moses comes to the Jordan River and dies, because he's not allowed into the promised land. He doesn't die because he's not allowed in. But whenever he passes away and God anoints Joshua as the leader and they cross this river, we see that Joshua is completely strong and courageous through his submission to God. Yeah. And being able to listen to what God has for his life and not just be like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, and like to go off of that too. Like I think that's like the biggest thing that like struck me too. It was like that's what, like when I was like writing this, I was like, man, I just got to focus on this, because like that's a huge thing. And it's like if you look throughout, like you said, like the whole book of Joshua, like submission is like a legit thing that happens. Yep. And like just kind of thinking about that, like kind of struck me in my own life too. I was like, man, how many times do I like just sit and listen? Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And like, I just think that was like, I don't know. I just love Joshua.
Oh, definitely. That's a great question. How many times in our own lives as Christ followers today, in this world we live in, where not only is the world in a pandemic, but in a world where there are so many just crazy things happening, like in our own city, in our own community, where there's riots and people are devastated by effects of things that are completely out of their control. What some person thinks about another person based on whatever is going on. How often do we just pause in our lives and listen to God and listen to what he has to say for our lives, and then submit to it and trust in it?
And that's like the big thing too, is like, you can sit and listen for sure, and that's great. But like then if like, if God gives you something and you don't do it, it's like
you didn't even listen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, my dad used to say it's like I'm like talking to a brick wall here.
Yeah.
Like the brick wall will listen, but it ain't going to do nothing.
Yeah. And like I kind of think of it as like, you have a friend and it's like, say like you love this friend so much, but your friend is very, very good at talking. Yeah. And so it's like, man, if they just consistently talk and you never get a chance to like talk back to them, and they never get a chance to like hear you, it's kind of like, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so like I think that's like sometimes how like, I don't know, for me, I don't know for what you guys are thinking, but like for me, sometimes like that's how like I felt like my relationship with God was, like especially in the beginning of like my early stages. I was always just like I was like constantly just talking with God, but I was never allowing myself to like let God respond to me, Yeah. So
definitely, that's super, super good. And so kind of looking again at who Joshua is. Joshua was a brilliant military leader for that nation. Yeah. He was strong. He was a spiritual influence among the people in his community. Yeah. I see we're getting some questions, which is awesome. We're going to jump right into that here in just a second. But Joshua was a man of faith. He was a natural born leader, but like the number one thing that I think that you can look at Joshua and see is that his submission and his submissiveness to God's will is like superior over all things. And so
I would agree there.
I see some comments we got coming in. My mom is obviously watching. So hello, Mother. Mom. It's so good to see you. Thank you for joining. Feel free to engage in the chat and ask questions that
for sure
only have to do with the Bible. Yeah. But also Jay Carranza. First and foremost, Jasmine.
I got you.
Is it Carranza?
Oh God!
Oh, here we go.
I think it's Carranza, right?
Carranza. We're gonna go with Carranza.
Jasmine, if I'm wrong, I am so sorry.
I am so sorry as well. Sorry. I hope that I can meet you and apologize and kiss your feet and wash it with my hair and my tears. I'm just kidding. That's a joke from the Bible.
I knew you were going with that.
I'm sorry. I hope I pronounced your last name correctly, because you said that nobody ever pronounces it correctly. So I apologize.
I can see that.
But she asks, if Joshua was Moses' assistant, wouldn't he have known that he would have to lead Israel one day? And that's an awesome question.
That is a really good question.
I don't know. I'm not Joshua. I don't know exactly the rules and the statutes in that nation of I'm sure Moses had many assistants.
Yeah.
He couldn't have led the people of Israel out of 400 years, millions of people out of slavery by himself alone. God worked through Moses and did amazing, amazing, amazing things.
Yeah.
It is Carranza, not Carranza. But I don't know if Joshua would have lived his life thinking, like, if Moses dies, I got to be ready. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like, just thinking about that too, is like, you know, like what you said about like kind of like the support system too, is like, we don't always think about like, you know, hey, like when we, so let me say it like this. Sorry, I messed up on there.
No,
but it was more of like, you know, we always see like the one person who's always in the spotlight and we never see the team that's behind him for the most part. And so like, that's what I kind of felt like when I was reading Joshua, and like, as we're discussing this too, it's like, yeah, like Moses was the key figure and a lot of people focus on Moses, but like there's also a lot of people behind him who helped him move things forward. And I guarantee you Moses was like, hey, can you own this and can you take care of this and go do this for me?
Yeah.
And I guarantee you that happened and stuff, but you know, it's like we just don't ever read of those situations.
Yeah, 100%. And we never see a point where God is like, and Joshua serving under Moses knew that one day he would have to leave. You know,
exactly.
It's not, it might have been on his mind. He might have been thinking and preparing. Like, I guarantee that Joshua in his submissiveness knew that I'm also a leader among these people.
Yeah.
He was a military leader. And so he knew that he had responsibility to lead God's people in amazing ways, and he had to submit to God in order to do that. And so think about it like if the president, you have the president and the vice president, and there's these orders in line where if the president or somehow, some way in the future to pass away and die while he was the president, then the vice president would be moved into the presidency.
Yes. Yep.
But I strongly doubt that the vice president every day goes to sleep thinking, I better be ready to be the president. You know?
Yeah.
He's like, I got enough stuff on my plate I got to worry about.
For sure, yeah. Oh, 100%.
I got to take care of my own stuff before I worry about taking care of other people's stuff, you know? And so I don't know if that's a perfect representation, but I hope, Jasmine, you can kind of get some clarity on that. But let's continue in the book of Joshua.
Yeah.
And like you said, the book of Joshua is split. And you focused your sermon on the first handful of chapters. And so we see in this moment when Moses passes away, Joshua is appointed as a second Moses to lead God's people. And in his submissiveness, we see that God and being obedient to God is like it's a requirement of God's people.
Yeah,
you can't just listen to God and hear what He has planned for your life and think I'm not going to do that. You know, I'm going to do what I want to do.
Yeah.
It's not a choice. And we do have a choice to do it, but our choice should always be to be obedient to God. And so I saw this funny meme when I was scrolling through. I think my friend Colby posted it. Colby Allen, if you're watching this, man, I love you. But he posted this meme of a trash can, like this giant dumpster that's just in flames. And the quote was like, me when I try to live my life without Jesus for 5 seconds. It's just this raging flame in a dumpster. And so that reminded me of like when I'm not obedient to God and I look at my life and I'm like, man, I'm so tired and I can't get everything right. And like, I feel like I'm struggling every day. It's like, well, maybe it's because I'm not trusting in Jesus and trusting in His plan for my life. But also in verses Joshua chapter 23, do you have that pulled up, Matthias? I can pull it up real quick here.
I can open
but
this up
in Joshua chapter 23, Joshua gives us a very, very clear representation of what it means to be obedient to God. And so he says in verse 11, he says, so be careful to love the Lord your God. And this isn't saying like when you love the Lord your God, like you got to be careful to do it. What it's saying is you need to choose to follow God and to love God. We have a choice every day to wake up to love God. And we do that by our interactions with people on a daily basis, whether they're like us or not. We have a choice to love God and by representing our love for God, we follow His commands. We're obedient, we're submissive, and that's exemplified in the life of Joshua.
Yeah, and I think go along that too of like, I mean, I for those of you who have seen the video or my message, I did share a story in the end of it where it kind of goes along that is like, man, it's like, we're like required to love all people. Yeah. And it's not easy.
Oh, it's
not
like, easy.
Because it's like, I shared a story about a camp when I was in Minnesota and I was like, man, I really don't want to love on these people. Yeah. Like that was honestly like, if I'm being totally transparent, that was like legit my thinking, my thought process. I was like, I literally don't want to go over there and I literally don't want to love on these people right now because I'm like so tired.
Yeah.
But it's like, after now, look back on it, I'm like, holy cow, I'm so glad that I did listen to that. Because it's like, if I didn't, something super bad would happen.
Yeah, and
stuff.
God
And
wouldn't
so-
have been able to work through you.
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
If we only choose to do things based on our will, it makes it very difficult for us to be submissive to God working within our lives. And that's what this whole series is about.
Yeah. I think just to go off of that as well, is like, I think a lot of people nowadays, and a lot of conversations that I've had with many different age groups and different, people, they're always like, yeah, I'll do what God tells me, but they kind of treat it as like, oh yeah, I just have to do it, and they don't get anything out of it. But in reality, it's like, I feel like most of the times, like when I do something that God calls me to do, like he like rewards me in a way,
Yes.
It's either that's like, man, I feel like spiritually filled up, or like I feel like I've grown in an area that I was like weak in,
Definitely.
or something like that. And I think that like if we were to like change our mindset of like, I'm gonna do this because I know this is gonna please Jesus, but also like, you can kind of be kind of selfish about it. You know what I'm talking about? Be like, I know I'm going to do this because I know that I need to grow in this area or something like that too.
Yeah.
And I feel like most of the times it's like God calls us to like situations that we are not necessarily comfortable with.
Yep.
I mean, because if you look at Joshua, it's like, man, you went from leading 0 people to 2 million.
Yeah.
Like that's a huge
step.
jump.
Yeah. It's a huge
jump.
step. And
So-
leading them not just in military combat, but leading them in their daily lives. Like,
Yeah.
leading
Yeah.
them towards Jesus. And in Joshua chapter 24, verse 15,
I
we
love
get
this
we get
verse.
a clear picture of this. But Joshua says this: "But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether gods, your ancestors, or those that served beyond the Euphrates, or the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you are living." And then he says this: "But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." Joshua, and I talked about this in my Paul sermon. Joshua didn't just walk the walk. Like, he didn't just talk the talk. Joshua didn't just say, "Hey, be submissive to God. Like, you have to do it," and then go and like not be submissive to God. Joshua was like, "You can choose every day who you want to obey, who you want to love. But as for me and my household, we're going to serve God."
Yeah.
And he was leading these people by example in his own life.
And I think that's so important too. And I love that verse. And I've seen many people like aesthetically
it's like on their house,
frame it on their
or
wall.
like on
you know
their
what I'm
doormat,
saying?
you know?
Yeah.
Me and my household.
And I think that's just so important too, because it's like he wasn't forcing them to do anything. He wasn't like saying that you have to follow this, you have to follow that. Like he was giving them an option, because if you think about following Jesus, like when we first accepted Jesus, it's like we made that choice.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? And it's the same thing. It's like Joshua's kind of like repeating here. It's like, hey, this is your choice to make. And not only like what you said, like just right now, but like also every single day. And that's one of the habits that I'm like continually trying to like get myself into, is like every single day when I wake up, the very first words that I want to come out of my mouth are like, Jesus, I'm going to choose you today.
Yes.
And those are the very first words that I try. Obviously I fail, but like those are the very first words that I want to try every single day, to be like, hey, those are the very first words I want to come out of my mouth every single morning.
Yeah.
And then every single night be like, God, I chose you today.
100%.
So
That's super, super good, man. And I want to touch just a little bit on this last part here, which is
this
last part of Joshua, which is super encouraging, and I think ties directly into this message this series that we've been talking about. And so in Joshua chapter 5, we see that they're about to go to the land of Jericho, and a lot of people know that the
First
story
earthquake.
of Jericho. Yeah, they travel around the city, and the walls fall down. And they blow their they blow their trumpets, and then the walls fall down. And VeggieTales, where they drink those Slurpees, and they're like getting shot at or whatever.
Okay, we'll
It's
be
so
honest, I
funny.
have not seen that episode of
It's
VeggieTales.
classic. Watch the VeggieTales on Jericho. It's hilarious. But this is the actual story. And so Joshua has just crossed into the promised land. And so verse 13 says this: "Now when Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua went up to him and asked, 'Are you for us or for our enemies?' And you know what the guy said? He said, 'Neither,' he replied. 'But as commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come.' Then Joshua fell face down to the ground in reverence and asked him, 'What message does my Lord have for his servant?' And the commander said, 'Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy.' And Joshua did so." And so you might read that and think like, oh man, what does that mean? That's crazy. Like Joshua's coming face to face with the commander of the armies of the Lord, and the guy's like, "Take your sandals off, dude." But I think this ties perfectly into what we've been talking about over the past couple weeks. The fact that these men didn't do anything.
Yeah.
God did everything through these
100%.
men. And so when Joshua is questioning the commander of the armies of the Lord and saying, "Are you for me Are you for me and my people, or are you for the or are you for the enemies, the Canaanites that we've been battling for so long? And the guy's like, nah, I'm for neither of you. I'm for God, right? Joshua immediately had to be convicted and be like, oh man, I messed up bad saying that.
Yeah.
Like, that is a direct showing that Joshua and the Israelites have a choice to either follow Yahweh, follow his directions, follow his commands, or not.
Yeah.
And all throughout you see that. And their victory and their deliverance from the Canaanites into the promised land isn't because they did anything. It isn't because Gideon destroyed 10,000 people in a valley. It isn't because, it isn't because of all those things. It's because God worked through them in their submission.
Which would have been crazy to see. Could you imagine standing on top of that thing and just watching?
Watching these guys just...
like...
Yeah, it would have been insane.
But anyway, yeah. So like I like one of the things that I love just about those short little verses, is that when he said, "Neither," he replied, "but as a commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come." And then the next word is then Joshua, like fell on his face. It's like right then and there. It's like he didn't like question it. He didn't like stop or like think about, oh, maybe is this true? Is this false? You know what I'm saying though? Like he's like, shoot. I need to do this. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's like,
submit.
Yeah. And I think that's like the obedience and the submission that like is so important and like kind of is underlying in a little bit of like, sometimes like we don't always pick up on that.
Yep.
And I think that's like really important for us to like check, like how well are we submitting to God every single day?
Yeah. 100%. It's not that Moses and Joshua and the Israelites didn't do anything. They did it through God.
They did.
God's plan worked out and they just played a role in it.
Yeah.
And so that's like a testament to God's like ever prevailing plan for the life of his people. If they choose to submit, choose to love him every single day. And we got another question from Jasmine.
Yeah, this one's a good one.
Yeah. Do you want to read that?
Yeah. I'd love to. It says, would Israel have been defeated if Joshua would have disobeyed God like Moses and listened to the people and attacked the city instead of the march?
Dude. That's an awesome question, and
that's really well thought out.
We're gonna touch on that, and then we can continue this conversation later in another podcast. And I think this is an awesome one that we could do as well. But Jasmine, there's a story a little bit later in Joshua where the Israelites have sacked Jericho. They've taken everything. They've done what God has asked them to do, and they go to this city called Achan. Right?
Yeah.
Or I think it's called Achan.
Achan.
Yeah. Something along those lines. And God tells them to do something almost similar, but there's a guy within the Israelites that steals, right? He steals gold and he steals silver. And because
like a bagger,
and because of their disobedience in that, they are destroyed. Like they go in to fight a battle and they're wiped out. Like they are defeated. They have to retreat. And Joshua's like, what the heck happened? Like, what happened? And then they find out that this happened and this man was disobedient and he stole from this time when they were supposed to just follow God's directive. And so I could be butchering that story. I need to read up on it a little bit more. But even just a little bit later in Joshua, we see that even after defeating Jericho by doing God's plan, they go and they fight a battle and God tells them to do something and somebody disobeys God. And because one person disobeys God, like a whole slew of terrible things happen to that nation. It's like when I'm playing basketball and I like get a technical foul or something. I'm not kidding. It's like when I'm playing with a team.
Have you ever gotten a technical foul?
I've gotten a technical foul, dude, even in intramural basketball. But I get a technical foul and then my coach is like, all right, now because Zayne got a tech, everybody has to run laps. It's like, because
like
one
team effort. It's a team
it's because one person messed up, everybody gets in trouble. And then everybody looks at you like, oh, dude, what are you doing? But, like, every single person in the nation of Israel played a role in trusting and submitting and loving God actively every day. And we see, Jasmine, that later when they don't do that, terrible, terrible things happen to that nation and they have to start again. And the whole book of Judges that I'm sure we'll get into in the future is God's chosen people, the Israelites, needing people to guide them and to lead them. Deborah, all of the judges that God places, he places them there because they sin, because they fall away, because they're disobedient, and they need to be directed back.
Yeah.
And so that I think that's a great place to kind of stop it out for today.
Yeah.
We can continue to dive into these things in the future.
We could go on.
I don't want to stop. I don't want to stop. I'm jacked up on whatever.
Dude, and
drink is
also,
in there.
I don't know if we know anything. If you guys don't know who this is Timmy.
That's Timmy.
We should have done this in the beginning.
That's a terrible horse.
No, that was pretty good.
All right.
That was better than most people.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
But this is Timmy. If you don't know who Timmy is, you have not watched any VBS videos.
Timmy and cheese larvae. Go check out VBS videos.
Yeah, go check out
VBS
video, guys, because those Those are hilarious.
Yes, hilarious
so
indeed.
good.
Well,
So good.
we've wrapped up this series called Zero to Hero. We've talked about Moses. We talked about
Yeah.
Paul. We've talked about Gideon. We've talked about Joshua. And next week, we're going to start an awesome series. James is going to kick things off talking about just the world we live in right now.
Yeah.
Talking about justice, talking about God's love for his people and how we need to be united. And so we're going to, I think, I need to check with James and with one of our new interns, but I think we're going to have an awesome interview from James. He's going to interview one of our interns named Willie, and they're just going to share their experiences together. And James is going to ask Willie what life is like being a black man and what that means for him, what that means for the community around us. And we're going to hear what we need to do as Christ followers moving into the future. And so we're going to discuss righteousness, God's righteousness, justice in the world today, and what it means to love our neighbors as ourselves.
Yeah. And I think that's like super important too, of like, just like hit on that a little bit. Like, it's like, you know, we as Christ followers, we do have to like, we do have something that we need to do about this, you know? And so I think it's going to be super good. I'm really looking forward to it and just seeing the conversations and, you know, everything that's going to come out of it. Yeah. I think it's going to be super good for all of us. And just, I think it's also going to give us great perspective
100%
on what is happening.
Definitely. So, I'm super excited.
Yeah.
We'll continue to be live every single week at 3 p.m. on Mondays. So feel free to share this with your friends, with your families, with other coaches that you might, with other guys that you might think want to hear it. So we can't wait to see you guys next week, Monday at 3 p.m. We'll see you there. Thank you guys so much for being here.